Here are the 3 tight ends that you need to be drafting in every single format this year. We'll tell you who they are in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy. On today's show, we are finishing up our series on the players that you have to draft in dynasty leagues and redraft leagues and best ball leagues. Any of your fantasy leagues that you're playing in this year, you need to have these players on your team. We're looking at tight ends today. Kate, who is the number one tight end that you must draft?
You have to draft Dalton Kincaid this year. And I'm saying this in every single format. Now, I know he didn't have the spunky year of a Sam Laporta, but he had pretty darn near close. Not close. I'm not going to say that, but he had a very underrated rookie season, I think, for the number of challenges that the Buffalo Bills offense went through last year. The biggest thing when it comes to Dalton Kincaid is that not only does he have the talent profile in impeccable receiving skills, he is a good route runner, he's a good athlete. He checks all of the boxes that you want in a breakout tight end. But what is new this year is the opportunity that he is about to have with the absence of both Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis, who have dominated the target share for the Buffalo Bills over the past 4 years. Like, this is going to be a game changer. And I don't think there's any tight end being drafted outside of the top 5 in redraft leagues right now, other than Dalton Kincaid, who is a true dark horse candidate to finish as the overall tight end 1.
Now, last year, over the final 11 games of the season, Kate, he was a very good option. He was, again, this is the final 11 games, 56 catches, 555 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging about 50 yards a game. If you average that out over to a 17-game schedule, you're talking about 87 catches for 858 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, obviously, the touchdown totals need to go up, and I think they will, partially because there's just going to be more targets. And I don't know if Josh Allen is going to have 14 or 15 rushing touchdowns again like he did last year. Like, that seems pretty fluky. So if the touchdown totals can go up and we can start to see him make more plays after the catch, I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing him not average 9.9 yards per catch, but maybe 11 yards per catch. And that could be the difference in him averaging 50 yards a game to 65 yards a game. The other thing that I want to point out about Dalton Kincaid is I want to kind of go back and talk about how unusual his rookie year was, Kate, because he started, well, he got, when he was at Utah, he missed the final couple games of the year with a back injury. Didn't do anything at the combine, didn't do anything at his pro day, so we have no numbers. Didn't do much during the offseason as he was continuing to get healthy. Comes into the year as the number 2 tight end behind Dawson Knox. Once Knox gets hurt, Kincaid becomes a starting tight end and posts those numbers that we just talked about. And then Knox does come back at the end of the year, and it's still Kincaid's offense, or it's his role as tight end 1. I just expect now that he's fully healthy going into year 2, this is probably going to be the biggest leap of his career. Like, this is probably where he's going to grow the most as a player. So could he go from, a 600-yard tight end to a 900-yard tight end? I think so. And I think he's going to be the number 1 option in this passing attack. I want Dalton Kincaid in every single league this year.
Very fair. And I think there's a lot of concern out there with the presence of Dawson Knox, who they did
Oh,
pay. They gave him a decent payday. But let's not forget that before Dawson Knox got injured last year, he was playing that primary receiving role as a tight end, averaging 4 targets per game. After coming back from injury, and this is, once Dalton Kincaid had kind of had his breakout, we saw him relegated to more of that traditional blocking role. We had 6 games here after, or sorry, 7 games after returning from injury, didn't have more than 3 targets in a single one of them, right? Had 2 games without any targets
yep.
whatsoever. You look at his role in the postseason, 3 total targets, 2 receptions, 13 receiving yards, and a score.
Meanwhile, Dalton Kincaid was very good in the playoffs. I think he had something like 111 yards in those 2 games combined. So you can see how Buffalo wants this thing to go. Like Dawson Knox is a good blocker, and I think they want to use more 12 personnel. He's going to be the inline guy, and you're going to see Dalton Kincaid kind of detached from the formation playing in the slot.
Meanwhile, Dalton Kincaid, that was never his calling card. I think people need to remember back to him as a prospect and think, okay, coming out of Utah, he wasn't a primary blocking tight end. The Bills didn't trade up for Dalton Kincaid as a blocking tight end. They traded up for him as a dynamic receiving option.
Correct. Yes. Correct. I really, really like Dalton Kincaid this year. There's so many different reasons why I think he's going to be the main receiver on this team. I have a feeling that they're going to start shifting this offense to look more like a Kansas City offense, where they're running the offense through the middle of the field rather than the perimeter, like which is what Buffalo has done the last couple of years with Diggs and Gabe Davis. But I want to talk about his ADP right now, Kate, because right now on Dynasty League football, his ADP is actually up to tight end 3, 45th overall. That is a big jump from where he was last month when he was being drafted as tight end 5 or tight end 6. But in redraft leagues, he's being drafted as tight end 6 behind Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. There is almost a 40 spot difference between Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and then where Dalton Kincaid's getting drafted. And I don't agree with that at all. I think, actually, I'm going to just tell you, there have been multiple drafts this year where I've just drafted Kincaid over those guys 2-3 rounds ahead of ADP. I just feel so strongly that Kincaid is going to be the better player this year in fantasy leagues.
I think that's very fair. And Mark is a big part of that, I think, comes again from looking at how many vacated targets are open for the earning in this offense. I don't think we're understating enough. Yeah, obviously we lose Stefon Diggs. He accounted for 728 of Josh Allen's 2,612 total pass attempts dating back to 2020.
Yep.
Gabe Davis accounted for 339. That's almost 1,000. That's over 1,000 of Josh Allen's 2,600 total pass attempts in that span. Gone, finito, done. And then you look at Dalton Kincaid. I mean, 91 targets in your rookie season, that's nothing
Yeah.
to sniff at, right? 671 receiving yards for a rookie tight end. Again, nothing to sniff at. Like, he had a very solid rookie season that I think got extremely overshadowed by the monstrous breakout of Sam Laporta. But Dalton Kincaid with this offense, with the way that I think they're looking to approach the game this year, Dalton Kincaid just fits that so well. And
Yes.
for what I think they're going to gain in Keon Coleman in terms of like a big play threat on the outside, I'm going to be honest, I look at him as more of a Gabe Davis type than
Yep.
the consistency of a Stefon Diggs. Keon Coleman is not the refined route runner, the
He's
refined
not Diggs.
separator.
No,
That is
no, he is a downfield contested catch receiver that has long speed, but not the short route running. I also just trust Buffalo's organization. Like I get moving on from Gabe Davis because he got a dumb payday from the Jags, right? Like I get it. But they also traded away Stefon Diggs. It's not like they lost him in free agency. I don't think you trade away Stefon Diggs if you don't already know that you have somebody on the roster who is going to be like a superstar receiver or they can handle a bigger workload. And it's probably the singular reason why I'm so in on Dalton Kincaid this year.
Let's go. All in on the
All in.
Dalton Kincaid hype train. And I mean, my modest projection for him is going to be somewhere around 130 targets. Like
I
I
mean, it's not
think
crazy.
it's not crazy. And honestly, there's a very big realm of possibility where that is even more significant
Yes.
as they gain traction throughout the season.
All right, let's talk about another tight end that you can get significantly cheaper than Dalton Kincaid, but also has league winning upside. Let's discuss Jake Ferguson next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you have quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kay, let's talk about another tight end that you have to draft. Let's say you miss out on Dalton Kincaid. There's a tight end run that goes early in your draft. Who are you turning your attention to?
100% without a doubt. My favorite mid to late round tight end is Jake Ferguson, right now being drafted as tight end 10 on ESPN Fantasy. And Marcus, even in terms of his dynasty value, I think a huge value, tight end 12, he is heading into year 3. He's 25 years old, attached to Dak Prescott for now, TBD on the future. But Marcus, I think he could be a dark horse candidate. I don't think he has tight end 1, like the overall tight end 1 upside, maybe a la a Dalton Kincaid. However, I think Jake Ferguson has easy top 5 upside, top 6 upside based on his opportunities. Now you look at year 2, it wasn't really anything to write home about in terms of overall efficiency. Ranked 15th among tight ends in fantasy points per route run, 13th in fantasy points per target, but finishes the overall tight end 9 on the year. Now, what I want to call attention to, however, is the number of high value opportunities that Ferguson had last year. He was tied for the 3rd most red zone targets among all tight ends last year, 2nd most end zone targets in a high volume passing offense with the Dallas Cowboys that, let's be honest, they completely neglected the run this year. Jake Ferguson is effectively their wide receiver too. Brandon Cook's a very different player, but you want to talk a safety blanket wide receiver too. That's effectively Jake Ferguson here for Dak Prescott.
I agree. There's so many things about Ferguson I want to get to. The Cowboys, again, a little backstory here. The Cowboys drafted Luke Schoonmaker in the second round last year coming out of Michigan because they weren't sure about the tight end position going into the 2023 season. They just lost Dalton Schultz in free agency. So even during training camp, there was some battle between who was going to be the starter. We get to week 1. It's a washout. It's a rainout game in New York. Ferguson plays quite a bit, but I mean, the Cowboys hardly throw the ball. They win 40-0. The next week, they're still rotating tight ends. By week 3, Ferguson becomes the full-time starter. So if you look at the final 15 games of the regular season, Kate, plus the playoff game, that's 16 total games. That means, and you look at those numbers, 76 catches for 829 yards and 7 touchdowns in year 2 in those final 16 games of the season. Pretty incredible. And now you look at the targets on this Cowboys offense. It's CeeDee Lamb, who's been holding out, has not been present at anything this offseason. You have an older Brandon Cooks. The Cowboys cut Michael Gallup. There's no Tony Pollard to throw to in the backfield. I think Mike McCarthy in the final year of his contract, he's going to go down swinging. He's going to go down throwing the ball like crazy. Ferguson, who had somewhere around 102 targets, if you include the postseason, 114 targets, I think he's going to be somewhere closer to 130 target range. And because of the Cowboys offense, which routinely is one of the best in the league, which routinely throws a lot of touchdowns to the tight end position, go look at Dalton Schultz's numbers in Dallas. I think Ferguson is a screaming value in both your redraft leagues, again, being drafted as tight end 10 in redraft leagues, but certainly in your dynasty drafts where he is tight end 12 coming off the board at pick 106. I don't know how you pass on him once you get to the hundreds in your drafts.
I think probably the biggest question, probably the most interesting aspect of looking at Jake Ferguson and his current value right now is the fact that he's actually being valued lower, despite the fact that he's only heading into year 3 of his NFL career. We know that, tight ends, especially some more, of the, Jake Ferguson, more of a traditional tight end than maybe the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid to be, right? Like, those tight ends take a little bit more time to see their both of their skill sets in terms of passing ability, route running ability, pass blocking. Like, it takes time to bring all of those different skill sets together. But Jake Ferguson heading into year 3, which, usually we should start to see things click even more down the stretch, we're valuing him less. And I think a big part of that is the question mark at quarterback. Dak Prescott entering the final year of his deal with the Dallas Cowboys. How much does your view of Jake Ferguson long-term hinge on the presence of Dak Prescott? Because this entire team could look really different in 2025. You mentioned Mike McCarthy. You mentioned Dak Prescott. Like, is there any as the resident Cowboys expert, like, is there a chance that this offense and this entire team just isn't the same? Because I feel like that's probably the biggest linchpin for people in terms of their value of Jake Ferguson long term.
Sure, I think there's a chance that happens. I think it's pretty likely that Mike McCarthy is gone after this year. I think it's maybe 30-70 that Dak Prescott is gone after this year.
Wait,
But I think
30% that he'll be a
30% that he'll be gone, 70% that he stays. But Kate, I think if you say that about a lot of these tight ends, you look at a lot of them, I think that's the case for some of them, right? Like, look at Trey McBride. Is there a chance that Kyler Murray just falls on his face this year and the Cardinals are drafting a new quarterback next year? Absolutely. Is there a chance that Mark Andrews gets surpassed on the depth chart by our guy Isaiah Likely, or he's not able to stay healthy? Or what about Kyle Pitts? I think you can make some arguments for a lot of these guys, but I'm not stressing out about it too much because the Cowboys have historically been a franchise that values the tight end position. And I think Jake Ferguson's just good at football. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, look at all the advanced numbers from PFF. Receiving grade, 86th percentile. Zone grade, 88th percentile. 72nd percentile in yards per route run. 80th percentile in yards after the catch per reception. He did all of this in year 2. I expect him to be even better in year 3. And I think no matter who's throwing the ball, who's coaching him from the sidelines, is going to want to make sure that he's involved in game day. That's all. I could not be buying Jake Ferguson anymore.
Yeah, I mean, again, especially in redraft, even if you have these hesitancies about the potential future of the Dallas Cowboys, like, again, you mentioned it. This is a highly potent NFL offense. This has been a team that
Yes.
has been atop the league of scoring, not just last year, but the last several years. Like, this is going to be a high volume pass attack, and I think that's only been further cemented by the fact that they made no investment in the run. They cannot
They're
rely
going to
on an
throw the
Ezekiel
crap out of the
Elliott.
ball. Yeah.
They're gonna have to throw the ball, and I think Jake Ferguson is going to be a very big part of those plans. So, even if you can't get over these long-term question marks, go all in on Jake Ferguson for 2024. We said this about him last year. If you've been a longtime listener of the show, you've been on the Jake Ferguson ride for a while. Last year, we called a top 12 season for Jake Ferguson, and we got it. Marcus, tight end 9. Give us your bold prediction for how high Jake Ferguson can finish in 2024.
Top 4, because I just think he's going to get an ungodly amount of targets, and he's going to get probably the most red zone targets on the Cowboys outside of CeeDee Lamb. And if he converts those targets into 7, 8, 9 touchdowns, we're talking about somebody who could challenge Sam Laporta, who could challenge Dalton Kincaid. Now, I don't think if Travis Kelce stays healthy and we have a typical Travis Kelce season, he's not going to put up those numbers, but could he be where Sam Laporta and Mark Andrews and some of those tight ends are at? Absolutely. Yes.
You heard it here first, folks. Top 4 season.
Yes, I think it's very possible. And you don't have to spend that price tag at all. I want to talk to you, Kate, about another tight end who is being drafted outside of the top 16 in dynasty drafts and in redraft leagues, who I think could be the next Jake Ferguson. Let's talk about Luke Musgrave next. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Listen, it's so easy to jump onto social media and start comparing yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's so easy to start envying other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together, when you're watching their Instagram reels or their Snapchat stories, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have so that you can start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers, we will be back on Monday to break down the latest batch of ADP from Dynasty League Football. We're going to look at the July ADP, some of the biggest risers, some of the biggest fallers on that Market Monday episode. So make sure you tune in for that. But Kate, let's finish out here with Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers. Why should you be buying him in both redraft and dynasty leagues this season?
I think the very simple answer, Marcus, is that we don't necessarily know how to diagnose this Packers passing attack. But what I do know is that there are a couple of reasons I'm leaning toward Luke Musgrave as the preferred receiving tight end option. Now, Luke Musgrave, let's not forget, had a pretty significant injury last year, a lacerated kidney, I believe it was, missed significant time, only played 11 games, ended up ranking 5th on the team in total targets. So when you look at the stats for Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, at face value, it looks like there was more of an even 50-50 split. But Tucker Kraft actually played a full 17-game slate in the regular season. You look at what they accomplish in terms of efficiency metrics, right? We saw Tucker Kraft, outslate Luke Musgrave in terms of yards after the catch per reception. I'm not totally surprised by that because he had a lower average depth of target, 4.9 yards compared to Luke Musgrave's 7.3 yards average depth of target. Luke Musgrave targeted on a higher percentage of his routes run, just over 17% in comparison to Tucker Kraft's 13.6%. We saw Luke Musgrave get a higher percentage of deep target, 15.1%. Outperformed him in terms of yards per route run, catchable targets that were caught. Like, from an efficiency standpoint, this was Luke Musgrave's game. And I mean, you look at, again, that performance over the full course of the season, like, it may not seem like a ton, but 4 targets per game, 32 receiving yards per game, and it has a position, I think, in a real opportunity on an ascending offense to become a more significant, take on a more significant role in this receiving game.
So Luke Musgrave, going back to his final year at Oregon State, he had a knee injury that he suffered in week 2, did not play the rest of the year. There was some concerns that maybe that would be a knee injury that would knock him out for the entire offseason. Wasn't the case. He went to the Senior Bowl. He did everything. He went to the Combine. He ran a 4.61 at 253 pounds, just an elite athlete. And then he comes into his rookie year and gets banged up, still manages to produce numbers. But going into year 2, Tucker Kraft tore his pec working out this offseason. He has not been present in anything for Green Bay. Doesn't sound like he's going to do much in training camp either. That has now opened up the possibility of Musgrave just being the full-time tight end 1 on this Packers offense. And we have to remember with Musgrave, he's really just a big wide receiver. Like, Kate, if you and I were rushing off the edge, I'm not sure he would be able to block any of us or either of us. Like, he's just not a blocker at all. I think his best NFL comp is like Jimmy Graham, when Jimmy Graham was Jimmy Graham, right? Back with the Saints.
Oh, Jimmy Graham, former basketball player.
Yeah, former basketball player. Yeah, that guy.
Little known fact about Jimmy Graham.
I love that. Anytime you mention Jimmy or Antonio Gates, that's the other one. Hey, do you know he used to play basketball? Musgrave is a big-bodied receiver and not a blocker. So what he's going to be doing in some of these long over routes, running down the middle of the seam, I could not be more excited about his potential with Jordan Love. I also love the price tag, Kate. You look in Dynasty leagues, he's being drafted as tight end 17 behind players like Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz. And then in redraft leagues, he's even cheaper. You can get him at tight end 21 behind Hunter Henry, Ben Sinnott with the Washington Commanders, a rookie tight end who's really more of an H-back, Tyler Conklin, Pat Freiermuth, Taysom Hill. I just think this is somebody who has elite athleticism and elite size, and he's paired with an ascending quarterback on a very good offense. These are the types of players that end up helping you win leagues. Could not be more in on Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, and I think the biggest probably like barrier in terms of the thought process for, going all in on Luke Musgrave is the presence of Tucker Kraft. They weren't drafted all that far apart, right? And you look at the stats, like I said, if you're box score scouting, it looks like they had a pretty similar season if you don't realize that Luke Musgrave missed some significant time with a very significant injury. I do love that you brought up that he's just kind of a big-bodied receiver, right? And that was so well reflected in the usage and the percentage of snaps that these guys spent blocking. Luke Musgrave, among all Packers tight ends, had the lowest block percentage in terms of his total offensive snaps. Just over 38% of his snaps on offense were spent blocking, either run blocking or pass blocking. And he earned the second lowest pass blocking score among the Packers tight end. In comparison,
He doesn't block.
Kraft,
He can't block.
He can't block. But like the deployment shows that, right? Tucker Kraft was the highest graded pass blocking tight end per PFF on the Packers roster, and he blocked 51.3% of the time. I would venture to say if it weren't for the Luke Musgrave injury, that percentage might be a bit higher.
I agree. He's not a blocker. And they drafted him knowing that. You look at his blocking stuff at Oregon State, during his sophomore and junior year. It was bad. He's not a blocker, but they didn't draft him to block. They drafted him to make big plays down the seam. And that's what we care about in fantasy anyways, is your ability to make plays, to catch passes, to stretch the field. I think Luke Musgrave is a really good upside bet later on in your drafts. Again, in your redraft leagues, Kate, being drafted at pick 169. 169. That means in a lot of leagues, he's just going undrafted, which is absolutely insane. Go grab Luke Musgrave now before the year 2 breakout happens. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Go check out the YouTube channel. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy, as well as Behind the Steel Curtain. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you right back here on Monday.